Lucky you.
36 best
Tuned
holes in
into
golf.
Alternate Shots podcast,
Barney's Army.
where we talk about
Sandy.
golf, poker,
James Bond.
horse racing,
Double.
classic movies.
Zenyatta.
We have no script.
Down the stretch they come.
We are glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Hey, Billy, we've got a couple of announcements for the Alternate Shots podcast. If you like our content, we ask you to please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. You'll be aware of all the new episodes that come onto the channel. Say, we're also on Twitter, or as they call it these days, X. And you'll see little snips of our episodes on Twitter. On Twitter, on YouTube, comment so that we can get your input and make our content even better for you. So, Billy Regan, we are skipping a beat here off the golf course, away from the horses. We are not talking about classic movies today, Billy. What are we talking about?
Poker.
Billy,
Poker.
We're talking about poker. Everybody's got to get excited. And our special guest today is semi-professional poker player, Shawn Quillin. Welcome to the program, Shawn.
Thank you, Bob. Looking forward to talking with you.
I'm not in Las Vegas, but Billy, tell everybody where you're at today.
I'm at the Mohegan Sun, and I'm here to play a little poker, a little video poker. Might get a little crazy with the Wheel of Fortune machine, but mostly to learn something from our guest here, Shawn, who's a way higher level player than we are, in my opinion. My opinion's always right, so don't argue with me.
Let's take a look at this first hand right here. This is the World Series of Poker event. Very first hand. You ever played with Sammy Farha, Shawn?
I have not played with him. I've been in the same room with him on multiple occasions, but we've not been at the same table.
For anybody thinking about taking up the game, this will discourage them.
He is among the top fearful poker players of the last 3 decades anyway. And he's a tournament player, but he's also a high stakes cash game player.
I don't think he's in the World Series of Poker Hall of Fame at this point, but I expect him to be in there.
I expect this hand is in there.
Are you a cash game player, a tournament player, Shawn, primarily? What is
I am primarily a tournament player. I like the thrill of the competition more so than making a little bit of money. So the tournament really suits my game and my overall desire much better than cash games. Of course, I will play cash in between tournaments or early in the morning or late at night if I get knocked out of a tournament. But my primary focus certainly is Texas No Limit tournaments.
Put us in the main event hall, if you will.
Sure. It's a monstrous room, typically on the order of 500 to 700 poker tables in one monstrous convention center with people filling each table up. You hear the constant riffle of chips, this sound that people make when they clash the chips together, and they do it constantly. They do it many different ways. You hear people who are upset, people who are excited. Certainly at the main event, there's definitely a palpable thrill in the air where, it's a lot of times there are people who have never played in the event before. You have people dressed in crazy apparel. You have people getting autographs. You have the TV from all over the world. People, you have various pros who are being taped. And then there's poker. They shuffle up and deal, usually having a former champion or a celebrity who says a few words and then kicks things off by shuffle up and deal, and then we're off.
How many World Series of Poker main events have you played in?
I've played in 3.
Do you remember the first hand that you played? Did you play it or did you lay it down and just lay it down because you didn't want to go out in the first hand? Did you have any superstition about that?
I don't have a superstition about that. I'll play whatever is dealt to me. But I am confident that in my first main event, which was 2012, I sat there a long time before playing any significant hands. I was nervous, I was excited, and I didn't want to make a mistake right away.
So before we roll this video, you're seeing Oliver Hudson's back is to us. You can see his hat and his hair, bushy hair.
Sure.
But Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn's son. And you see he's got a pair of 10s. And the odds there are basically 70-30. He's got a 2-1 favor. He's got a big lead going into the flop. And he made a pretty good bet that many people might not have even called in the first hand, but Sammy Farha did with ace 10. Ace 10 is not necessarily a strong starting hand in the first hand with 10,000 people playing at this event. How good is my hand now after a raise?
Well, Sammy's a very good player, and he knows when he's ahead and when he's behind. So he's willing to play more hands than a lot of amateurs would. What I do see is that the relatively inexperienced players playing a hand like ace 10 offsuit, as this is, and they overplay it because they see an ace and they think that's really good. But they're typically playing against people who have a better ace or a pair. Hudson has at this point. So you're right. It's not a great hand, but again, Sammy can handle it up against a definite amateur player here.
Let's take a look at the flop.
And he's going to call with his ace 10 offsuit.
Oliver Hudson in the lead right now with his pocket tens. The flop is ace, ace, 10. Both get full houses, but Sammy's got the nuts.
You gotta be kidding me. This is
Cooler.
the very first hand of the main event for both of these guys. Hudson has tens full. I mean, he can't get up. This is a disaster movie for him.
Do you have any comment on the poker face of Farha particularly? His blood pressure, his eyes, nothing moved.
That's exactly right. It's not exciting at all.
But cartoons going off in his head.
And he's listening to Hello Dolly and trying to keep his blood pressure even. You don't see a darn thing. He didn't move. He didn't look at his chips. I know that your friend Negreanu would say a tell is when you see a flop and people look at their chips. That usually means they hit the flop, right?
Yes, indeed. They're trying to figure out how much money they can put in there because they think they're ahead.
Yep. Well, anyway, let's take a look at the rest of this because it's pretty exciting.
Farha earns the check mark, but both players check.
Both were slow playing it, and Mr. Hudson is in bad shape. He's got the tens full. He's not going anywhere.
He thinks he's trapping, right?
For Hudson, but it's second best. He bets
Yeah,
300
he's
chips.
way ahead here.
Farha raises now to 1,300. That's a lot for this point of the tournament. Well, hand one.
All in.
And Hudson goes all in. And Farha calls immediately.
Oh my God.
Very first hand of their main event. Sammy's got the nuts. And Oliver Hudson is in shock. I mean,
Oh my God, doesn't cover it.
No doubt, especially in the main event. It's such an exciting time. You want to stick around. Everybody wants to cash or make it through the first day at least. And to go out in the very first hand is just
No one in the world can lay that hand down.
Yeah. Where his mistake, is his bet sizing, right? He went all in on after the queen, and there's no reason to do that. Typically, when you go all in like that, your opponent's going to fold. They're only going to call you when you're beat. So you would bet a small amount to try to, slowly procure some money from your opponent, not go all in because you're super excited.
Well, that's what Farha did with his bet.
Yeah, he did it right. Yeah, he slow played the flop.
This is poker. There's a million combinations of things that can happen to you. You haven't seen them all, and you've been playing poker for how long?
I've been playing tournament poker since 2007. I drove from Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live, to just outside of Louisville, Kentucky, Evansville, Indiana, to play in a $5,000 buy-in World Series of Poker circuit event. It was the very first tournament I played in, and I literally was reading Harrington on Hold'em while I was driving, reading a book while I was driving.
Not even the Audible.
Not the smartest thing, but nonetheless, I bought in for $5,000, ended up taking 12th in that tournament for about $12,000. Driving home, thinking to myself, I think I'm going to like this. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Well, it's like going to the horse track for the first time and you win the daily double. It's almost like the horse gods or the poker gods are messing with you. They're reeling you in. That was your very first tournament. You almost tripled your money. You had a big smile on your face. You could remember all the guys you knocked out. And you figured, I got the world here. I
did not expect it to go that well. In retrospect, it was poor money management to go up and spend $5,000 on this tournament. But I had the time. I wanted to do it, and it was what I thought might be just a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But ended up becoming a thing for me, for sure. When you go into a 200-person tournament, are you like Lucas Glover today? You think, boy, I think I can beat all these guys today. He just won 2 tournaments in a row, right? Or Tiger in his prime. Do you have that kind of confidence that's backed up by your expertise and your experience? I'd like to think so. Like a lot of poker players, we probably think we're better than we really are. Perhaps I've been fortunate and I'm not as good as I think I am, but I definitely work on my game. I'm a numbers guy. So yeah, I fully expect to win. Kind of my mantra is I'm the best player here. If I don't let luck get in the way of me, I'm going to win.
Well, Johnny Chan too. When Johnny Chan got into a hand, he always had the best of it. And you like to go in with the best of it, and you're not trying to draw out on somebody in an important hand.
Yeah, when my money goes in, I typically have the best hand. That's right. I know where I stand, and I'm willing to put the money in. But sometimes, luck doesn't work in your favor.
Take us through a tournament or a hand that you might recall.
I would say a hand like pocket nines is a hand that is going to be ahead most of the time. A few people will call you with Jack 10 or a reasonable ace. But typically, you kind of know that you will have a good hand, but it's certainly not pocket aces or pocket kings or ace king suited. And basically, you're hoping that the cards are low, or you're hoping there's a 9. And if so, you'd love to have an ace and a 9 on the flop, because it's quite likely that you're up against top pair, a pair of aces, while you have a set or 3 of a kind. And then it's just a matter of how can you milk that opponent for as much as possible. You don't want to raise too, you don't want to bet too much. You don't want to bet too small. You want to put money in the pot, but just enough that it feels good for them to call. Do that on the flop, and then again on the turn, and then on the river, you want to get some value from your 3 of a kind, or perhaps even a full house by that point. And so value bets are the way that I make my money. Typically, a lot of less experienced players and amateurs they think that big bluffs are the way to win in poker, and there definitely is a role for bluffing, but it's not what everyone thinks, that you're going to have a 6 and a 4 and you're going to beat someone who has a pocket kings. That just doesn't happen that often. It's not wise to consider that very often.
Pairs are hard in hold'em poker, right?
No doubt. But yeah, those people, they're the ones who you're gonna stack early in the tournament, because they're gonna overplay that pair of 6s or the ace when I have a set of 9s. That's why people show up at tournaments relatively early, because the easy money is still available. After several hours in a tournament, sometimes the easy money is already gone.
Your strategy early on in a tournament is build a stack.
Build a stack, absolutely. You want to avoid confrontations for all your chips if you can, but you have to be willing to gamble on occasion. But if you're up against a standard table, by playing wise poker, you should be able to increase your chip stack steadily over each level. Well, early in the tournament, since the blinds are relatively low relative to your chip stack, the number of big blinds that you have, you certainly can fold for a while if you like. But later in the tournament, when the number of big blinds, the average big blinds decreases, you have to start playing hands. You have to be more aggressive, get involved in more pots, steal pots that don't belong to you in order to maintain or increase your chip stack. If you're waiting for pocket aces or pocket kings, you're going to slowly bleed.
Why do you constantly hear 9s trip up more than other pairs? Why do you hear that? I hear that a lot. There's no science behind that. But
no, of course not. Another one that I hear is always comes a 7. Pocket 7s, when they show up, it's always a 7's always coming. Yeah, of course, there is no science to that, but it is fun when it happens.
When somebody puts a stiff bet in front of me, okay, they ace king, maybe they have kings, maybe the aces, and I look at my hand and I've got 9, 10 suited. I'm willing to go in and call whatever that stiff bet is, because I've learned over the years, those are the hands that break those big starting hands.
Absolutely right. Yeah, those speculative hands, those suited connectors are the way to beat people in a cash game, for sure. And in a tournament to some degree as well. But you're exactly right. You know what they have. They don't know what you have. And so when the flop is, 7, 8 jack, you're going to stack them.
Have you ever been able to get away from those kings?
I I have not. I've definitely paid off aces more times than I would like. I've certainly folded ace king suited, but pre-flop, no, I have yet to fold kings.
Tell us about folding ace king suited.
This actually happened recently. I was playing a tournament out in Las Vegas at the Aria, and it was like 450 players. We were at the final table of 9, and I had a middle to slightly below average stack. Maybe I was in like 5th or 6th place out of the 9. I mean, a limp, and then a raise, and then a re-raise in front of me. I looked down at ace king. Yeah, I'd be the 4th person in the pot. I'm facing a raise and a re-raise, and they all had me covered. They all had more chips than I did. Clearly, these people wanted to play a big hand. So I folded ace king.
When you say they had you covered, they had both people that had
raised had more chips than I did.
They had more chips than you did. So what you're assuming as a professional poker player, they're going to get it in. Maybe the guy that first raised is going to get all in, and you're going to have to. So you're basically donking or throwing away your chips here if you call and then fold later on.
Yeah, ace king is a very good hand, no doubt. And there are times when I and others would maybe go all in with that. There are times that that you might call because you have, it's a reasonable hand, but it just didn't feel right. The people who were betting were not particularly loose. I could read that they had good hands. So the first limper, I fold, that limper folds. The initial raiser re-raised, then there was an all-in and then a call, and they had aces and kings.
Oh,
and I would have been gone. And I ended up winning that tournament. And you have to be willing to fold good hands on occasion in order to withstand that. It just didn't feel right, and I'd rather be the aggressor than the caller. So there are times when you should do that, though I haven't done that with kings, admittedly.
Well, some people with the hand that you had might have gone all in right there and then, and you're going to get stuck because you're going to get called from at least one, if not both of those players.
And yes, and I've made that mistake before, or maybe not even a mistake, but certainly that play has happened where I called and or went all in with an ace king and end up running into aces, but not that time. Worked out all right. I think I ended up winning. First place was around 50,000.
When you said you figured out those guys had something, was it merely from the lack of play that they had prior, or did you see something visually on them that you picked up as a tell?
No, I don't give myself that credit. It was the type of players they were and what I've seen from them over the previous couple of hours of play. The re-raiser put in the 3-bet had been relatively stoic and quiet, went in with good hands and wasn't going to be 3-bet bluffing. The worst hand that he could have had was jacks, but certainly it was jacks, queens, kings, or aces.
Okay, Shawn, I'm under the gun at a table where the guy in the 9 seat, I'm in the 5 seat. The guy in the 9 seat has raised 15 or 20. It's 2-5, no limit. He's raised 15 or 20 every hand, maybe 96% of the hands.
Right.
So I looked down at a pretty good starting hand and limp in. I figure he's going to raise, and the whole table limps in the whole way. Nobody raises. There's a heavy duty guy on my right named Lewis who's very difficult, but nobody raises. The flop comes ace 5, 9, maybe ace 5, 8, 2 hearts. So I check around to the aggressive players. Everybody checks. The aggressive guy bets $20. Lewis calls the 20. I call the 20. The turn is now the 5 of spades. So now there's 2 hearts, 2 spades, and 2 5s on the board. I check again. I think I've got the best hand, but I'm trying to figure out how to get some money out of it. The aggressive guy checks. Then the really aggressive guy bets $35. So I just smooth call him, and the other guy folds. The river does not make a flush. I check again. The aggressive guy bets 35 again. I'm pretty sure I've got him, so I decide to raise to 80. See if I can get a little more money. He makes it 365.
Well,
I go all in for 1400. He takes a long time and calls me. What do you think I had?
I think you have a boat,
Yep.
and I think he's got ace five.
And that's exactly right. I had a boat, aces full. I had slow played the
Okay.
aces,
All right.
it dumped in my lap, and he was slow playing ace five. So
The only hand you're worried about there is the pocket fives. You could lose the quad fives, right?
that's it. That's the only hand that can beat me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. When people are piling in money, when you've got the essential nuts.
I'm sitting there with turning an aces full boat, thinking I'm not going to make 15 cents out of this hand. And then the guy all of a sudden makes it 365. I was like, whoa, he's got a five. All right.
Thankfully.
So,
And then well, if he's got the ace of the 8 or 9, and then you're perfect.
yeah. I went all in and he called. He took a long time to call it, but he did call.
Yeah, crying call. He
He
knew.
had me covered. I mean, the guy makes a lot of money down there, so he shrugged it right off, and I'm sure he had the money back within 5 hands. So I
Oh,
played
yeah,
very tight for the next half hour, so I wouldn't look like a hit him and run player. But I that was hit. Once that pot came in, I was like, I'm not giving any of this back. Fold, 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 fold. So
Nice
but that
hand.
can backfire. Pocket aces playing slow, it can backfire more often
Well,
than not. So
yeah, it's certainly fine to do that on occasion, but you have to know that the more people in the pot,
yeah,
your
exactly.
likelihood of winning is going down, and you better make at least 2 pair or 3 of a kind. Otherwise, someone's going to have 6, 7 offsuit and make a straight or something.
Yeah, you definitely want to see an ace in that flop.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sitting in a tournament fairly late in the tournament. I look down at pocket kings. The guy on my left has raised and been called. The third guy raises the first 2 guys. I look down at pocket kings. They all have me covered. I go all in, all in, all in, all in. So all 4 of us are all in. And I'm drawing dead.
Wow.
I can chop with a mid straight.
Yeah, I would have. Yeah, it sounds like you got aces, ace, king, and then what was the third hand?
Ace king.
Okay, perfect. Oh yeah, you are drawing dead.
The kings are dead. The straight to the Broadway's dead. Any flushes are dead. Even
Yeah.
Jack 10-9 doesn't do it. Somebody's going to have the ace king's going to have me beat.
The guy with the aces isn't worried about any cards except for a straight.
That's it.
The only thing he's worried about is Queen Jack 10. That's the only hand he could beat. He could win
or flushes.
or flushes, right?
But I couldn't win a flush or a straight because I have kings and all the aces are out. Any straight to the king is the ace kings are going to beat me. I'm dead.
That's the absolute cardinal sin as a poker player, whether you're playing in tournaments or you're playing in a cash game where you're drawing dead. What's your expertise to tell us how you avoid that, Shawn? Because that's the worst.
That's a bad situation for sure. Well, you pay attention to your opponents, how they play, how aggressive they play, how much they bet, when they bet, the frequency with which they bet, and then you're dealing with incomplete information, so you're never going to be right all the time. But kind of like that, what we talked about earlier with the ace king suited, when people tell you they have a good hand, and you have no reason not to believe them, then you might be in a situation where you are in dire straits, whether you're dead completely or not. Maybe not, but yeah, you want to avoid those situations. So just pay attention to the hands that you're not in. Is probably the best advice I could give. Yeah,
there's going to be certain situations that are unavoidable, like that kid flopping 10s full of aces against aces full of 10s.
Right.
There's nothing. No one in the world folds there. It can't happen.
No. The only thing he could have done differently was, as we said earlier, just don't pile all your chips in when there's theoretically someone who could be. And when you have the absolute nuts, you still don't want to do that because you want to get paid. But yeah, you're not going to be folding anything.
And Farha really kind of reeled him in because Farha raised, it was I think 300 and Farha made it 1,300. That's not a gigantic raise, and the guy was like, "I got him."
Yeah, I got him. No doubt.
So looking at Las Vegas, do you have a preference of where you play in Las Vegas?
Sure. Yeah, sure I do. I do enjoy Aria, Venetian, and the Wynn. That's where I play poker. The World Series of Poker this year moved over to the Horseshoe, which used to be Bally's, but now it's the Horseshoe. It's next door to the Paris, and they did a fine job, but I wouldn't play there otherwise. Certainly the atmosphere is not as good, but that's where the World Series of Poker events primarily were. But during the summer, June and early July, there are so many poker players in Las Vegas that all of the casinos will have some sort of series of events. So any of those casinos will have decent sized events, large number of players in each and every day at those events.
So the World Series of Poker has a boatload of events now. Is it like a month long or 6 weeks long that this stuff is going on?
Yeah, it's like 6 or 7 weeks now. It basically starts on Memorial Day weekend, and then each day there are 2 numbered events, and that goes all the way through mid-July. So it might be 7 weeks at this point. And then not only do they have these events where you can win bracelets, they have smaller daily events. They have like 3 or 4 of those each day as well. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to play all hours of the day in Las Vegas. No surprise, I suppose.
And I guess they have tournaments where you can win seats into the bigger tournaments.
Yeah, they have those satellites. You can do single table satellites or what are called mega satellites. And that's kind of a fun little story. So for the main event, typically just before the main event, there will be these mega satellites. Basically, you can buy in for, we'll call this particular mega satellite where you $1,100 buy-in. The casino takes $100 off the top, and then $1,000 goes to the prize pool. And you might have 1,500 players playing in this event. So the prize pool is going to be 1.5 million. And so at the end, basically one of every 10 players is going to get a seat in the main event, or get the $10,000. You can get the $10,000, but they of course want you to take that money and buy into the main event. So those are fun tournaments. There have been years where I've played in 3 of those and won my seat, and then basically profited 9,000 on each of the other 2. And so those are great events because the quality of play isn't that high.
I played one at Foxwoods for a World Poker Tour event, and I ended up winning a seat, but I was down to less than a small blind at one point. Got very lucky a few hands, and then last.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I played in a mega satellite. Oh, it was at Beau Rivage down on the Gulf, and $550 mega satellite to get into the $10,000 World Poker Tour Southern Poker Championship. This is probably 10 years ago. I got all the way down. They were going to give 4 seats away in this particular event. We decided that with 5 left, that whoever took 5th, the other 4 would give them $125 or something. So they'd get their buy-in back, but they wouldn't get a seat. So I got all the way down. It was like 4 in the morning, and I go 5th.
Oh.
I'm just devastated because that's a really big event. I really wanted to play in that. A woman named JJ Liu is a professional player, one of the top professional players and top money winners of women poker, and she beat me fairly, fair and square on that particular hand. Nonetheless, I go to bed for like an hour or 2, get up, and they have another final one that morning, another $550. They're giving away 1 seat, which I won. Got into the event and ended up taking it was like 18th or 17th out of about, I don't know, 300 players. So it was a nice little profit, but boy, was I exhausted that day, because basically I was up all night and was that close to getting in, and then somehow the gods worked in my favor, and I got in a second time.
Well, you weren't going to say never say die.
Never say die.
What's the longest stretch you've played?
As early as 10 a.m. till 5, 6 in the morning. I don't know if it's been longer than that. I don't think I've played 24 hours straight, but I certainly have done that sort of thing where I have an early morning flight, and I just play right up until the last moment, and then hop in the cab and try to make the flight.
You know what we call that? A normal day for Billy Regan.
I think I need to spend more time with Billy. He sounds like my kind of guy. I think you do your best work at night, Billy.
Definitely. I was at a table up here one day, and somebody asked that question, the longest stretch, and the guy said, I've played 28 straight hours. Another guy said 36 straight hours, and the third guy was like Jesus, we play games in our neighborhood longer than that. So, you know, I've always said if you were on a flight from New York to Australia and there was a no limit poker table on there, you wouldn't get up when the plane landed.
So, what about online poker? Have you ever done that? The legitimacy of that, etc.
I really don't do it right now. I subscribe to online training sites. So I'm online playing poker, but it's really not in competition. I have done a little bit over the years and have had very little success in actually taking money out of the sites. It's just a struggle. If you get it at all, it's hard. I do have an account on WSOP.com that I can play on when I'm in Jersey or Michigan or Pennsylvania or Nevada, but I don't live there, so I don't play in that often. But yeah, the legitimacy scares me. As I said, I've lost thousands of dollars on prior sites just because they go out of business, Black Friday, just questionable business practices where they wouldn't return the money. So I really enjoy the thrill of tournaments, getting to know some of the people at the tables, catching up with old friends. I definitely play some locally. We have games every night that you can play in, cash games and or tournaments locally. But and I do that. But again, I like catching up with my poker buddies from around the country at these various venues, and I like the thrill of the competition. Try to win that trophy or bracelet or ring or whatever the case may be.
And the situations that develop, that's the beauty, the reward of tournament poker, especially when you play well and you got to win enough of the coin flips.
Right.
But to watch that field dwindle and then all of a sudden you're like in the money, that's where it gets so much fun because if you're a cash player, a lot of cash players don't like to play in the tournaments because they can spend 6 hours and not get a nickel for it
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah.
But once you get through there, you've played well and you're playing well, and maybe they getting hit with the deck now and then. That's when it's the most fun for me.
Absolutely. I really do. I love that thrill. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. It's kind of a way to get that without putting my life at risk.
Yeah, I agree.
So if I rattle off the following names, tell me which poker player you resemble or you would like to resemble most. Patrick Antonius, Jennifer Harman.
I'd like to look like him.
Jennifer Harman, Antonio Esfandiari, Phil Helmuth, Phil Ivey, or Doyle Brunson.
That's an easy one. It's Phil Ivey. He's the best player. He's the best player ever, I believe. He's well mannered, mild mannered, makes the wise decisions. Doyle, is a legend, tremendous legacy. Jennifer has had her ups and downs. Esfandiari has won some really big tournaments, but I don't know that his resume would stand up to Phil Ivey's at all. And then Phil Helmuth, he's very successful. He has the most number of bracelets, World Series of Poker bracelets by far. I've played with him a number of times. We actually went to college together. We're the exact same age, went to the same school from the same state, and so we're cordial. We're buddies, but I don't necessarily respect the way he plays poker, and he berates people at the table. So I'm not even close to trying to resemble him.
Does he play for his own money, or is he bankrolled when he comes in there by some billionaire who just wants to say, "I bankrolled Phil"? How's he do?
It's definitely some of both. Yeah, he definitely has backers, but he plays with his own money.
Did you ever come across in your travels Stewie, the gin player, who then went on to win the World Series?
Stu Unger.
Stewie Unger, yeah, of course.
No, I think he had passed before I really got into tournament poker.
He was so good at gin, no one would play him anymore. So he switched to poker, and then he wins the World Series twice. He was a little bit of a loose cannon, for sure, but he was fearless.
Yeah, I mean, the stories I hear of him, it's like he could see through the cards. He just knew what to do all the time.
You brought to my mind, Billy, maybe you share the story where you met Benny Binion.
Oh, yeah. I met him at a boxing match out in Las Vegas. Iran Barkley was fighting Tommy Hearns, and a very good friend of mine was Barkley's manager. We had, all kinds of money on Barkley to win. He was a big underdog, 4.5-1 underdog. And when he won, me and my brother were jumping up and down on the seats cheering, and the guy behind us taps us on the shoulder and says, "How much did you have on him?" And we looked at each other and said, "Oh yeah, we bet him too." So he's like, "All right, tell me more." So we tell him, yeah, our buddy is his manager. We have a small piece of it. And he introduces himself as Benny Binion. I almost fell off my chair.
No doubt.
It was a year before he died. Big cowboy hat on. It was quite an experience talking to him for a few minutes.
Oh yeah, yeah. You remember that forever. That's exciting.
Yeah.
The remarkable part of that story is you were sitting in front of him. How did that happen?
Well, because we had contacts.
Yeah.
There were probably 50 of us from my hometown that out there for that boxing match, and these guys were crazy. They weren't malicious, but they were walking trouble. 50 garrulous, happy, drinking, smoking people that were.
I thought you were going to say that Benny asked you how much money you had on the bout, and you were going to say, you had X, and he said, "Oh, that's great. You guys should be really happy. I had 100X on that." But
Yeah, he probably did. He probably did. But I had been, we were there a few days, so we were going from casino to casino, and every time I won at blackjack, I wasn't playing poker yet.
Yeah,
I was playing blackjack and roulette. Every time I had a profit, I'd go to the sports book there and put it on in Barkley. So I ended up with $1,700 on him at 4.5-1. The great part was getting in the cab and going from casino to casino to casino to collect.
Billy's first trip to Las Vegas, he brought $50, which meant a lot.
I also made provisions for a friend of mine to send me $50 the second day, so I know I'd have money the second day.
He didn't put it in his other pocket. He didn't trust his hands.
No, I would have been gone in an hour.
My first trip to Vegas was when I guess I was 21, because I don't think you could ever gamble below 21. So I guess I just turned 21 with a buddy. I stayed at a hotel called the Mariner. That obviously that doesn't exist anymore. I couldn't even tell you where it was, but I remember being up all night playing blackjack, I guess, and I don't know what I won, maybe $100, maybe $200. And I remember going back into the hotel room with each of those bills, just throwing it up on the bed, going, "Oh my God, I'm rich."
I got a rude awakening. My first night there, we decided to go from the Las Vegas Hilton to Circus. And we get in the cab and we're going to Circus, and I see a diner with a gigantic neon sign, biscuits and gravy, 25 cents. And I went like, "Oh my God, now I get it." Hopefully I'll get through this without having to have biscuits and gravy for a quarter, but wow.
This is great. Well, you got a hand that you want to end this discussion with, a good beat or a bad beat that you take with you in your pocketful experiences?
I alluded to it the tournament earlier, so I qualified or satellite into the Southern Poker Championship down at the Beau Rivage. I guess 2 hands. So the very first hand of the tournament, a gentleman who had just won the preceding tournament the day before, he won like $60,000 or $80,000. He was high on life and thought he could, he was going to do well in this tournament, of course. And so I pick up aces. He has kings. So the very first hand of the tournament, I double up, stack him, and he's gone. So I had chips the entire time. I ended up 7th after the first day, and really was, I was ecstatic until I spent some time at the table when we were getting late on the second day with a gentleman who was a pro out of Florida, and I don't recall his name exactly, but clearly very talented player. I run my kings into his aces late on day 2, and I do the standard get up from the table until the river card becomes a king, and then I sit back down. And that was probably the greatest, at that time, the greatest poker experience, because he was a really good player. It basically lectured me all day, and then I ended up stacking him with complete luck right at the end, and then I was able to parlay that into a nice finish the next day.
Are you a talker or a listener? I spend a lot of time folding in tournaments. what's your stance there? Do you just keep your low profile, or do you mix in with the conversation so you can read people that way?
I do both. I find that I become talkative when things are going well. So I am pretty reserved when I don't have a lot of chips or I lose a big hand. But you can see my big exhilaration with basically how frequent and how loud I speak. But that's not during the hand. That's between hands. When I'm in a hand, obviously that's different. But I do like to pay attention to what others are doing. It definitely pays off.
Like having to listen to a guy who just made a birdie walking to the next tee. All of a sudden he's happy.
Right. I know that feeling as well.
I'm going to ask you to do one thing. You
Yes,
got a pair of fours. Somebody raises you, and you decide to call the raise. Flop comes. You ready?
Yep.
You're going to flop comes 4-4-10. Let me see your face. Oh my God! It looked like you just got audited. There's no show tunes there, right, Billy?
I had a hand here at the Mohegan Sun against Teddy, who's a good friend of mine here. I flopped a set of sixes and I slow played it. The board was small, 6-4 deuce. And it turns out he flopped a set of fours and he's slow playing them. And a four hits the river.
Oh my God.
I bet like 200. I said, Teddy, I'm trying to tell you something. I bet 200. He goes, make it 1,200. I'm trying to tell you something. I was like, do you really? Really?
Well, Shawn, this has been great. Any parting thoughts here, Billy?
Just thank you so much for your time and hearing about your the way you handle yourself at tournaments and getting back up when you get knocked out on the bubble. That's all good stuff to know.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been delightful. I've enjoyed getting to spend this hour with both of you. Look forward to catching up at some point.
Hey, listen, if you ever decide to come up, I know you come up to Atlantic City, but if you want to come up further and play around the golf and Wingfoot with us, go on to Foxwoods or back down to Borgata.
That could definitely is a possibility.
And you are a golfer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you can take my money at the poker table. I'm going to try and take it back on the course.
All right.
Billy's first trip to Las Vegas, he brought $50, which meant a lot.
I also made provisions for a friend of mine to send me $50 the second day, so I know I'd have money the second day.
He didn't put it in his other pocket. He didn't trust his hands.
No, it would have been gone in an hour.
Thanks for joining us today.
Billy Harman.
We really appreciate your
Double
feedback.
Indemnity.
And please
Markey.
subscribe to the
Two
show
Outer.
and hit
Claude
the bell
Harman.
icon so you get notified
Movie
of
Classics.
new episodes.
Mark Gable.
Hit them
Odd
hard
Job.
and hit them off.
Best 36 holes.